Did you know that working with clay, just shaping earth with your hands, it's actually one of humanity's oldest crafts? We're talking thousands of years back.
It's pretty incredible to think about, isn't it? People making essential things, beautiful things, long before, recorded history.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that today, right now, in our super digital world, this ancient craft is having this huge comeback, a real modern renaissance.
It really is. There's this pull towards the tangible, the authentic.
Welcome to Secrets of Handmade Creators,
The official podcast of the Handmade Business Academy.
the podcast for passionate creators who want to turn their craft into a thriving business.
Before we continue, if you're passionate about growing your craft business, make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button right now so you never miss out on valuable insights.
Okay, so today we're focusing on the world of handmade ceramics and pottery. We've got a stack of source material insights from creators, market analysis, technical details.
Yeah, and we're going to unpack it all for you, extracting the key knowledge to help you understand the craft, the business, the whole picture.
So let's start with the basics just to make sure we're all on the same page. Ceramics, pottery. What's the difference, really? And what makes handmade stuff special?
Right, so ceramics is kind of the big umbrella term. It covers anything made from clay, fired high enough to change it permanently. Think tiles, bricks, industrial stuff, but also art, sculpture, and pottery.
Ah, so pottery is a type of ceramics.
Historically, yeah. Pottery specifically focused on functional vessels, bowls, cups, plates, things for everyday use.
But that's changing now.
Definitely. The lines are really blurry today. Lots of ceramic artists make pieces that are both useful and beautiful art objects, or purely sculptural things.
Okay.
The real magic of handmade, though, whether it's a mug or a sculpture, is that originality. Those little variations, a slight wobble, a unique glaze drip, they're not flaws.
Right, their character, the maker's touch.
Exactly. That's the soul people talk about. It connects you to the person who made it.
So how do people actually make these things? The sources talk about a few main techniques.
Yeah, 3 primary methods stand out. The one everyone pictures is probably throwing on the wheel.
The classic ghost moment.
Yeah, pretty much. You use a spinning wheel, center a lump of clay, which is harder than it looks, and then shape it with your hands as it turns.
Good for round, symmetrical things.
Perfect for bowls, mugs, vases, plates. And once you get the hang of it, it can be relatively quick for those shapes. But getting good, that takes serious practice. Centering, pulling up the walls evenly, it's a skill.
I bet. What if you don't have a wheel or want less symmetry?
And you're looking at hand building.
Yeah,
This is basically shaping clay without the wheel, using just your hands and maybe some simple tools.
like what kind of methods?
The main ones are coiling, rolling clay ropes and stacking them. Slab building using flat sheets of clay, cutting and joining them, kind of like clay carpentry. And pinching, just shaping small lumps with your fingers.
Sounds like you get more freedom with shape.
Totally. Great for organic forms, sculptures, things with sharp angles. Often looks more rustic or textured. The barrier to entry equipment-wise is lower, but it can be slow, especially for bigger pieces. The sources mentioned it can take weeks just to build and dry something complex before it even sees the kiln. Get a lot of control over detail, though.
Okay, wheel for speed and symmetry, hand building for freedom and detail. What's the third one?
Slip casting. This is quite different. You use liquid clay called slip.
Liquid clay?
Yep. You pour it into plaster molds. Plaster is porous, so it sucks water out of the slip where it touches the mold, forming a clay shell inside.
Ah, so the mold defines the shape.
Exactly. Once the shell is thick enough, you pour out the extra slip, let it dry a bit, and then you can remove the piece from the mold.
Sounds almost industrial.
Some people see it that way, maybe semi-industrial, but it's a totally valid technique in the handmade world. It lets you reproduce complex shapes consistently, get really thin walls, things that are super hard or impossible with throwing or hand building.
Okay, so it has its place for specific designs or maybe producing a series?
Right. It's great for things like delicate teacups or intricate decorative objects where you want multiples.
Got it. So those techniques cover a huge range. Now, why are so many people drawn to ceramics right now, this renaissance we mentioned?
Well, a huge part is the creative satisfaction and honestly, the therapeutic side of it.
Therapeutic.
Yeah, working with clay. It's very tactile, very grounding. You have to focus, be present. It pulls you away from screens, from the digital noise. Transforming that lump of earth, it's deeply rewarding.
I can see that. A kind of mindful escape.
Exactly. It ties into that whole search for mindful activities, for authentic experiences. And ceramics is inherently slow. You can't rush clay.
No microwave for clay, as the sources say.
Huh, yeah. Drying takes time. Firing takes time. It forces patience, which feels like an antidote to our instant gratification culture. It connects you to a really ancient traditional practice.
Plus, there's just so much you can do with it, right?
Oh, endlessly.
Hmm.
Different clays, countless glaze possibilities, firing methods, shapes, textures. You can constantly experiment, learn, find your own unique style. It never gets boring.
And you end up with something real, something you can use.
That's a big one too. Making useful things, a favorite mug, a bowl you eat from every day, a vase for flowers. People love having objects with a story, made by a real person. It adds meaning to daily life.
Yeah, you feel a connection to it. Okay, so that covers the appeal. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about the challenges. This isn't always an easy craft, is it? What are the big hurdles creators face?
Oh, definitely not easy. The sources are pretty clear on the major pain points. First up are the technical gremlins, problems with the clay and glazes themselves.
Like things just breaking.
Cracking. It's the bane of many potters' existence. Clay shrinks when it dries and when it's fired. If it's uneven thickness or dries too fast or has trapped air, crack.
Ugh, after hours of work.
For weeks, it can be absolutely gut-wrenching. You open the kiln, and there it is. Even experienced potters deal with it. Just part of the physics of clay.
Wow. Okay, what else besides cracking? Glazing seems tricky too.
Very tricky. Glaze is essentially a thin layer of glass fused to the clay. It has to fit the clay body, meaning expand and contract at a compatible rate.
If it doesn't fit.
Problems. You can get crazing, that network of fine cracks on the surface. Looks kind of vintage sometimes, but often it's a flaw.
I've seen that.
Or the opposite, shivering, where the glaze actually flakes off the edges because it shrinks less than the clay. That's a bigger problem.
Yikes.
Plus, glazes can run down the pot if they're too thick. They can get bubbles or pinholes. The color can come out completely different than you expected. Every firing is a bit of a gamble.
Sounds stressful. Constant learning curve.
Always. You're constantly refining your process, testing, taking notes. Mistakes are inevitable, even for the pros.
Okay, technical issues are huge. What about the practical side? Time, money.
Yeah, that's the next big one. Time. We said it's slow. It's really slow. Shaping takes time. Then drying easily 1 to 2 weeks, sometimes more, depending on the piece and the weather. Can't rush it.
Or it cracks.
Exactly. Then the first firing, the bisque firing. That whole cycle, heating up and cooling down slowly, takes maybe 3 days.
3 days, just for the first firing.
Yep. Then you glaze it. Then the final glaze firing, which goes much hotter, up to around 1300 Celsius for stoneware. That's another 3-day cycle, roughly.
So from start to finish, a single piece could easily take 3 weeks. Longer.
Easily.
Yeah.
Which makes production planning, fulfilling orders, scaling up, really challenging. And it directly impacts pricing.
Pricing. That must be hard.
It's one of the toughest parts.
Yeah.
You've got material costs, sure, clay, glaze, but the big costs are energy for those long, hot firings and your time. All those hours shaping, drying, glazing, loading kilns.
And you have to factor in the pieces that fail, right?
Absolutely. You need to account for breakage and failures in your pricing. Plus, kiln maintenance, tools, studio space, it all adds up. Handmade ceramics are inherently more expensive than mass-produced stuff.
And customers don't always get that.
Sometimes not. So finding that price point where it reflects the true cost and value, but people are still willing to buy, that's a real balancing act. You have to do the math, research the market, and not undervalue your skill and time.
Okay, so time, technical woes, pricing, anything else?
Shipping. It's a nightmare for potters selling online.
Because it's fragile.
Fragile and heavy. So you're paying more for shipping because of the weight, and you have to spend a ton of time and money on packing materials to prevent breakage. Bubble wrap, peanuts, sturdy boxes, often double boxing.
Oh, the boxing.
Yeah, pack the items securely in one box, then float that box inside a larger box with padding all around. It's the best way, but it adds cost and effort. The fear of it arriving in pieces is real.
I can only imagine. And getting started requires some investment too, doesn't it? Equipment.
Definitely. Compared to some crafts, the startup costs can be significant. The big one is the kiln. Buying one is thousands of pounds or dollars, plus you need the right space, ventilation, power. Renting kiln space is an option, but it's an ongoing cost and less convenient.
And a wheel, tools.
Yep, a wheel if you throw, plus basic tools, buckets, shells, glazes, clay. And the operating costs don't stop. Energy bills for firing are substantial. Kiln elements wear out. Studio rent or mortgage costs. It's a proper business investment.
Okay, that's a sobering look at the difficulties. So
Yeah.
knowing all that, what are the biggest mistakes people make, especially when starting out? Things to avoid.
Looking at the wisdom shared by experienced creators in the sources, 3 big mistakes really stand out. The first one is messing up the pricing and product range right at the start.
Underpricing, you mean?
Often, yeah. Or sometimes overpricing without understanding the market. But mostly, it's not calculating all those costs we just talked about, especially time and failures. They end up basically working for free or losing money.
Ouch.
And tied to that is offering too much variety initially, like trying to make mugs, bowls, planters, sculptures, dinner sets, all at once.
Spreading themselves too thin.
Exactly. It becomes inefficient. You can't master the process for everything. Your material costs are higher, buying small amounts of lots of things, and your brand looks scattered. Experienced folks say, start focused. Pick a few things, get really good at making and pricing those, build from there.
Makes sense. Like, I heard about this one potter, let's call her Sarah. She started out making, 20 different things. Coasters, tiny animal figures, huge vases. Her Etsy shop was all over the place. Sales were slow.
Right.
Then she got some advice, maybe at a craft fair. She decided to focus just on her unique planters with these really cool carved textures she did. She honed the designs, figured out her cost properly for those, took amazing photos.
What happened?
Sales took off. People understood what her brand was about. She became the planter lady with the cool textures. Focusing made all the difference.
That's a perfect illustration. Focus helps with efficiency, branding, everything, which leads right into the second big mistake.
Yeah.
Neglecting brand identity.
So not having a clear style.
Yeah. Or not presenting it consistently. In a crowded market, especially online, people need to recognize your work. You need a unique handwriting, as the sources call it, a consistent aesthetic, whether it's your shapes, your glaze palette, your surface decoration, something that says, this is mine.
Finding your niche.
Finding your niche, absolutely. And figuring out that sweet spot between what you love to make and what people actually want to buy.
Yeah.
It's not always the same thing.
True.
And it's not just the pots themselves. It's consistent photos, your maker's mark or logo, how you describe your work.
Yeah.
It all needs to hang together to build a recognizable, trustworthy brand. Otherwise, it just feels messy.
Okay. Pricing focus, brand identity.
Sure.
What's the third common pitfall?
Trying to grow too fast. This is a big one in ceramics because scaling up is so tricky.
Because of the slow process and equipment needs.
Exactly. You get a bit of success, maybe a big wholesale order, and the temptation is to say yes to everything, ramp up production overnight, but suddenly you need another kiln, double the drying space, maybe staff.
Which is hard to find and train for skilled craft work.
Very hard. And if you rush, quality suffers. You miss deadlines, pieces crack because you hurried the drying, glazes get sloppy. You can damage your reputation really quickly.
So slow and steady wins the race.
Pretty much. Experienced creators advise growing controllably. Get your processes totally nailed down first. Make sure your glazes are reliable, your firing schedule works, your packing is solid, then gradually increase capacity. Optimize before you maximize. Avoid getting overwhelmed.
That's really solid advice. Okay, let's switch to a question from the community. We often get questions about practicalities. Let's imagine, say, someone named Alex messages us on Instagram. Alex asks, I love making pottery in my community class, but buying my own kiln feels like a huge leap. How can I manage firing costs or find alternatives when I'm starting small?
That's a fantastic and very common question, Alex. Buying a kiln is a major step. So first, renting kiln space is definitely a viable option early on. Many community studios or even individual potters with larger kilns offer firing services.
How do you find those?
Ask at your class, check local art center listings, look at online pottery forums or Facebook groups for your area. There's usually a per piece or per kiln load fee.
Okay, so renting is option one.
Right. The downside is scheduling, transporting fragile greenware, unfired pottery, and relying on someone else's firing schedule and temperatures. But it avoids that big upfront cost. Another thought is focusing initially on techniques that might require fewer firings, or making smaller items so you can fit more into a rented kiln load, making it more cost-effective per piece.
Like focusing on earthenware, which fires lower, or maybe collaborating with another potter.
Yeah, or even exploring things like raku firing if there's a group doing that locally, which is a different process. The key is you don't have to buy a kiln immediately. Explore rentals, share kiln space, maybe even look into used kilns later on, but start smart and manage those costs.
Great practical advice for Alex. All right, time for an actionable quick tip, something listeners can use right away.
Okay, thinking about those challenges, let's focus on shipping because it causes so much stress. Quick tip, master the double box method, seriously. Wrap well, box it, Then float that box in a larger box with plenty of padding on all 6 sides.
Don't skimp on the padding between the boxes.
Exactly. At least 2 to 3 inches of padding peanuts, crumpled paper, foam, all around the inner box. It's the single best way to protect fragile ceramics during transit. Takes extra time and material, but saves heartache and refunds.
Solid tip. Okay, let's deconstruct a success story. You mentioned Raquel Acosta, Glaze Me Pretty, earlier. Can we break down her journey?
Yeah, her story is really inspiring for starting small and leveraging social media. So, the situation. Raquel started her ceramics business, Glaze Me Pretty, from a garden studio in the UK. She was making pieces she loved, but like many starting out, needed to build her audience and reach customers effectively.
A common starting point. What was the change?
The pivot. She really focused on Instagram, not just posting pretty pictures of finished pots, but sharing her process, her studio life, engaging with followers, using relevant hashtags. She strategically built a community around her brand online. The sources noted her follower count jumped significantly, from about 2,400 to 11,000 in just 1 year, 2020.
Wow, that's impressive growth. What was the outcome?
The result? That dedicated online audience translated directly into sales and visibility. She proved, as she stated, that you absolutely can make a living comparable to a regular salary from handmade ceramics, driven largely by that direct connection she built through social media.
And the lesson for our listeners.
The takeaway. Don't underestimate the power of social media, especially visual platforms like Instagram for ceramics. It's not just a gallery, it's a tool to build community, show your personality and process, and connect directly with people who appreciate your work. Authenticity and consistent engagement can be incredibly powerful growth engines, even starting small.
Great takeaway. Show the journey, build the connection. Now, thinking about experienced creators looking back, what's something they often say they'd do differently if they started again? That expert retrospective view.
A recurring theme, touching on what we discussed earlier, is wishing they'd gotten serious about costs and pricing much sooner.
Really drilling down into the numbers.
Exactly. Many admit they just guessed at prices early on, often way too low, because they lacked confidence or didn't want to do the math, they didn't factor in their time properly, or the cost of failures, or overheads like kiln depreciation.
So they were basically subsidizing their early customers.
Pretty much, yeah. Or they were working incredibly hard for very little return. Looking back, they'd say, treat it like a business from day one. Set up a simple spreadsheet, track everything: clay, glaze, firing costs, packing materials, your hours. Calculate your break-even point. Understand your profit margins.
Even if it feels daunting at first.
Especially then, because knowing your numbers gives you the confidence to price appropriately, to know which products are actually profitable, and to make informed decisions about where to focus your energy. Doing that homework early saves so much struggle later on.
That's invaluable advice. Treat it like a business, know your numbers.
Okay, as we're talking, a few questions come to mind, digging a bit deeper. You mentioned those dominant trends: minimalism, rustic, wabi-sabi. How important is it for a new maker to pick one and stick to it versus experimenting?
That's a great question. I think early on, experimentation is vital for learning and finding your voice. You need to play with different styles, techniques, glazes, but from a business perspective, aiming towards some level of consistency fairly early helps.
So customers know what to expect. Right. If your shop looks like 5 different people made this stuff, it's confusing. You don't have to rigidly lock yourself into one box forever. But developing a recognizable style, a cohesive collection, makes your brand stronger and helps you attract your ideal customer. Maybe experiment widely in the studio, but curate what you present publicly with a bit more focus.
Finding a balance between creative exploration and market coherence. What about online platforms? Etsy versus your own Shopify store? When's the right time to make that leap, or should you do both?
Another common dilemma. Etsy is fantastic for discoverability, especially early on. It has a huge built-in audience actively looking for handmade goods. The fees are a factor, and you're playing in their sandbox, but the traffic potential is undeniable.
So start on Etsy, maybe?
Often a good starting point. An own e-shop like Shopify or WooCommerce gives you total control over your brand, customer experience, no direct competitors on the same page. But you are 100% responsible for driving all the traffic. That takes marketing effort and often budget.
More work, but more control.
Exactly. Many successful creators do both, using Etsy for acquisition and their own site for building deeper customer relationships and perhaps offering exclusives. Or they might transition more heavily to their own site once they have a strong enough following and brand recognition to drive traffic themselves, often via social media or email lists. There's no single right answer. It depends on your stage and goals.
Okay, that makes sense. One more, we talked about the stress of firing. How much of success in ceramics comes down to just technical mastery versus, say, design sense or business skills?
Oof, that's tough. They're all crucial, but honestly, without a decent level of technical mastery, the other two can't really shine. If your pots constantly crack or your glazes always fail, it doesn't matter how brilliant your designs are or how great your marketing is, you don't have a viable product.
Technical foundation is non-negotiable.
Pretty much. You need that reliability. But technical skill alone isn't enough either. You need a good eye for form and surface, that design sense, to make things people desire. And you absolutely need the business skills, pricing, marketing, customer service, to actually sell it and make a living. It's really a three-legged stool. Take one away and it wobbles or falls.
A perfect analogy. Technical skill, design vision, business sense. Okay, let's start wrapping this up. We've covered a lot of ground, from the joy of clay to the trials of the kiln and the market.
It's definitely a craft that demands a lot: skill, patience, investment, resilience. But the rewards, that connection to material, history, and the customer, can be immense.
So key takeaways for someone listening. Master the technical side. Don't underestimate the time and cost. Build a clear brand. Price realistically. Pack carefully.
And grow sustainably. Don't try to do everything at once or scale too quickly. Find your niche, focus, and connect with your audience authentically.
And remember, the community is there to help.
Absolutely. Don't be afraid to ask questions on forums or groups. People are usually very generous with advice. For resources, check out places like the Ceramic Arts Network online. Maybe look into software like CraftyBase for inventory if you get serious. And glazy.org is fantastic for glaze recipes and information.
Excellent recommendations. Before we go, a final encouragement.
Just that the passion you pour into each piece is a unique selling point. People connect with that. Embrace the slow process, keep learning, and value your own skilled work. It's a challenging but incredibly rewarding journey.
Well said. And a final thought to leave you with. Considering the sheer time, the skill, the risk, and the story baked into every single handmade ceramic piece, are we valuing it just as an object, or are we truly valuing the history, the humanity, and the connection it represents? Something to ponder.
Definitely food for thought.
Thank you so much for sharing all this insight today, and thank you for listening to Secrets of Handmade Creators. If you found this valuable, please hit that subscribe or follow button, and maybe even leave us a review. It really helps others find the show.
We appreciate it.
And make sure you join us next time when we uncover the secrets of candle making. We'll reveal one simple trick with your smartphone that could seriously boost your product photos and maybe even your sales. You won't want to miss it.